I woke up after a bad fall and heard a nurse say, "But she has a DNR." For a second, I thought I was dreaming. I had never signed a do not resuscitate order. My son had, using a medical power of attorney I barely remembered agreeing to. The words floated above me like they belonged to some other woman, someone already finished, not me. I'm 72, an American mom who still drives herself to the grocery store and argues with the TV during baseball season. Before that fall, my life was small, ordinary, and peaceful. That night, I was in my kitchen in Ohio, stirring a pot of soup and wrapping little gifts for my grandkids in crinkly dollar store paper. My back ached the way it always does in the evenings, but it was the honest kind of tired, the kind you earn. Then my son Daniel walked in with a manila envelope pressed to his chest. He kissed my cheek, but his eyes were already on the table, like he was carrying something heavier than paper. "Hey, Mom," he said, "we should go over some paperwork." Those words, "some paperwork," pricked at me. People say some paperwork when they've already decided how the conversation ends. I felt a small knot of resistance, but I smiled anyway and wiped my hands on a dish towel, still playing hostess in my own home. He spread the forms between the salt shaker and the napkin holder. "It's just a medical power of attorney and an advance directive," he said, voice soft, almost rehearsed. "You know, just in case. Everyone does this now, just in case." The phrase slid under my skin. Just in case of what? Just in case I stopped being a person and became a problem to manage? I could hear care in his tone, but underneath it I felt something else. His fear, his impatience, his need to get everything settled before anything even happened. It stung that he was already thinking of me as a future medical situation instead of the woman standing right in front of him, stirring soup. I sat down across from him. The chair creaked under me. "Do we really need this?" I asked, and my voice came out smaller than I meant it to. He gave me that look adult children give their parents when they believe they know better. Gentle, patient, with a little edge of condescension. "Mom, it's responsible. If something ever happens, I'll be the one making decisions. This just makes it easier on everyone. Easier on everyone, not safer for me, easier for them." The distinction stung. I felt myself moved out of the center of my own life and into the everyone pile. But I swallowed it like I've swallowed so many things. I told myself he meant well. Good sons plan ahead. Good mothers don't argue. He slid a pen toward me. "Look, this just says I can speak for you if you can't. And here," he tapped another page, "you can say you always want treatment. I'd never let them do less than that. I'll always choose more treatment. You know me." That promise warmed and burned at the same time. Part of me relaxed. If my only child said that, maybe this really was just paperwork. Another part of me wondered, if his heart was already decided, why did he need legal authority so badly? And why did this conversation feel like a negotiation I hadn't agreed to enter? I tried to read, but the words blurred. Legal phrases, boxes, initials, signatures. I didn't understand every line, but I understood his expression. Determined, kind, and closed. He'd come here to get this done. If I pushed back, I'd become difficult. I've spent my whole life trying not to be a burden. That night, it hurt that my fear and confusion mattered less than his need to feel prepared. "Should I talk to a lawyer?" I asked, one last flicker of resistance. He chuckled softly. "Mom, you don't need a lawyer for this. It's standard. Those guys just scare you. You're fine. This is just in case." Then he added, like he was putting a hand on the door to end the conversation, "Trust me. Trust me. I'd trusted that boy since the day I first wrapped him in a blanket." Hearing him use those words now, smooth, final, made my chest tighten. It wasn't that I didn't trust him. It was that I suddenly realized he had plans for my future that I wasn't fully part of. And it hurt that he didn't notice how small I felt right there at my own kitchen table. So I signed. I signed because he was my son, because the soup was cooling, because I didn't want to start a fight over something he insisted was harmless. I signed while telling myself I was being loving, cooperative, sensible. I pushed away the sharp little voice that whispered, "You don't really know what you're giving away." Later, under harsh hospital lights after the fall, hearing that nurse say, But she has a DNR. That evening, safe in my kitchen, came rushing back, the pen in my hand. Daniel's calm confidence, my own silence. Every reassuring word he'd used now felt like a tiny betrayal wrapped in care. And for the first time, I wondered if loving my son had made me too willing to disappear from my own decisions. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping near my head and the squeak of a cart rolling down the hall. I stared at the ceiling tiles and felt something heavy settle in the center of my chest. The nurse's words kept looping. But she has a DNR, the doctor's reply, the way they both looked at me like I was already halfway gone. And underneath it all, Daniel's calm voice from that night in my kitchen, promising he'd always choose more treatment. Lying there, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. On the outside, I stayed still. On the inside, it felt like someone quietly pulled the floor out from under my life. I kept thinking, he made a choice about my care and he didn't even ask me first. The thought didn't hit like lightning. It stung in a slow, steady way, the way cold seeps through a coat you thought was thick enough. My mind started walking backward through our years together. The resentment didn't arrive all at once. It crept in, moment by moment, tied to memories I'd always filed away as signs of his busy life, his stress, his important responsibilities. Now I saw them under a different light. I remembered when he bought his first house, just outside Columbus, nothing fancy. He could barely afford the mortgage. I pulled money from my small retirement account to help with the down payment. "It's just a little," I told him, even though it wasn't little to me. He hugged me and said, "You're saving my future, Mom." Back then, those words made me feel proud. Now, lying in a hospital bed, listening to machines, I felt something else. He could accept my money for his future, but he could sign papers that could limit mine. That contrast hurt in a way I couldn't neatly explain. I saw myself standing on a ladder in that same house, hanging curtains I'd sewn by hand. I'd chosen cheerful fabric on sale and stayed up late to finish before his first winter there. He laughed and said, "You didn't have to go all out, Mom. It's just a house, just a house." The phrase slid past me back then. Now it burned. I'd poured time and care into making his place feel like home, and with one checked box, he had turned my body into just a case. Then there were the vacations I never took. My church group planned a trip to Florida 2 years in a row. I wanted to go. I even circled the hotel near the beach on the brochure. Both times, something came up for Daniel. A car repair, a dental bill for one of the kids. I offered money before he could ask. "I'll go next year," I told my friends with a smile. His grateful, "You're the best," Mom used to warn me. Now, with an IV in my arm, I saw the pattern for what it was. I canceled my own plans without a second thought, and he signed life-changing orders without even starting a real conversation. Little scenes kept rising, one after another. Me babysitting on short notice so he and his wife could have just one night away. Me cooking big holiday meals even when my knees hurt, because it's tradition. Me patching his jeans, ironing his shirts, helping with forms, showing up to every game when he was a boy. I remembered sitting in the bleachers under the hot sun, cheering until my throat went raw. In all those moments, I never held back care, and now I was hearing that my own child had told medical staff to hold back care from me. The resentment grew in the silence, shaped by details. It wasn't only that he had signed something, it was the way he did it. The memory of his voice in my kitchen sharpened until it almost had edges. "I'll always choose more treatment. You know me." That last part, "you know me," stung the most. Apparently I didn't know him as well as I thought, and he didn't know me at all if he believed I'd want my story to end without a fight. Then I saw how trust had worn down, almost without my noticing. The first time he called me paranoid for asking about a bill. The time he joked, "Don't worry, Mom, we'll pick your nursing home someday," and everyone laughed but me. The way he started talking over me at appointments last year, answering for me like I wasn't fully there. Each moment had made me feel small, and each time I swallowed it, I told myself the same thing. He's stressed, he's tired, he means well. Now I saw the pattern. Every time I swallowed my discomfort, I handed him a little more control. And then my mind landed on the soft memories, the ones I used to hold like proof. His little hand in mine crossing the street. The night I stayed up sewing his Halloween costume so he could be the only astronaut in his class. The time he ran a fever and I sat by his bed counting his breaths, promising myself I'd do anything to keep him safe. I never hesitated. I never chose less for him. Feeling that difference, seeing it so clearly, made my chest ache. Even then, I didn't hate him. That almost made it worse. I felt hurt, disappointed, and strangely calm. It was a quiet kind of pain, like standing outside your own house and realizing someone changed the locks. Lying there, I understood something I'd never said out loud before. Loving my son did not mean letting him decide how my story ends. That realization didn't come with yelling. It arrived cold and steady, settling beside my resentment and finally giving it a shape I could hold. In that deep silence, I knew one thing for sure. This would not stay the way it was. The next morning, when a young nurse came in to check my blood pressure, I cleared my throat and said, "Can I see my chart?" My voice sounded calm, but inside I felt like someone standing on thin ice, afraid that one wrong step would crack it. The nurse hesitated, then gave the polite smile people save for older patients. "Your son has been very involved," she said. "He's helping us make sure your wishes are followed." The sentence hit like cold water. My wishes, my son, both in the same line as if they matched. I knew now they didn't. She told me I'd need to speak with the doctor or the patient advocate to review records. As she left, the words "your son has been very involved" kept echoing. It stung that she said it like praise. To her, he was the devoted child. To me, he was the person who had quietly signed a DNR and told them I wanted comfort care only. The gap between how she saw him and how I was starting to see him hurt more than the ache in my hip. A few hours later, a woman in a blazer stepped in and introduced herself as Carla, the patient advocate. Kind eyes, clipboard, a chair pulled close like she had time for me. "I heard you had questions about your documents," she said. Just hearing someone say I had questions, as if it was normal, allowed, made my throat tighten. For 2 days, it felt like everyone talked around me, about me, like I was a file with a bed number. Carla spoke to me like a person. "I never agreed to stop treatment," I told her. "I never agreed to that order they keep mentioning." My hands trembled a little. "I signed a power of attorney, yes, but my son promised he would always choose more treatment." Carla frowned, not at me, but at the situation. "You have the right to see what's in your chart," she said, "and you have the right to change who speaks for you. You have the right." Those words warmed something deep in me that had been cold since the fall. She stepped out and came back with a thin file and a printout. My name was at the top. Underneath, in neat typing, were words that made my stomach twist. Code status, do not resuscitate. Comfort measures only. Healthcare proxy, Daniel, son. Carla slid the paper toward me. "These instructions were confirmed by your son," she said gently. "He told staff this is what you wanted. It was one thing to suspect it. It was another to see it in black and white. He told staff this is what you wanted." The words cut deep. He had spoken for me, using my name and my supposed wishes, without asking me first. Resentment flared, sharper now, clean and bright. Every time he told someone she wouldn't want aggressive care, my real voice got pushed farther away. Carla pointed to a note. "Here the doctor documented a conversation with him," she said. I forced myself to read. Daniel reported, "Mom always said she doesn't want to be kept alive by machines. She wants comfort only." My chest tightened because I remembered that conversation. It was years ago, after his grandmother had a hard time in the hospital. I had said I didn't want to be treated like an object, but I had also said, if there's a real chance for more time with you all, I want them to try. He took the part that suited him and left out the rest. Then Carla sighed and added, "He also asked about long-term care coverage. He said he didn't want you to linger because it would be too hard on the family." That word, linger, made my skin prickle. Suddenly I saw more than fear. I saw someone managing a future, weighing my care against his convenience and finances. I thought of the checks I'd written, the plans I'd canceled, the way I'd carried weight without making it anyone else's problem. Now my own recovery was being measured like a burden. It brought back an old memory, standing in a kitchen as a young woman while my father told me there was no money for college. We did what we could, he said, shutting the subject like a door. I'd figured it out. Extra shifts, no complaints. And now here I was again, the person whose needs came last. Only this time it wasn't tuition. It was my chance to keep going. That afternoon, Daniel came by. He stood at my bedside with his phone in his hand, eyes kind but distracted. "Hey, Mom," he said, kissing my forehead. "You look better today." The normal tone hurt the most. It sounded like everything was fine. "I heard you talk to the doctors," I said quietly. He shifted, the smallest flash of annoyance, like I'd mentioned something awkward in public. "Yeah, I've been updating them," he said. "I told them you don't want anything extreme, remember?" We talked about that. The way he said extreme made it sound like I was unreasonable for wanting options. "We didn't talk about this," I said. "You promised you'd always choose more treatment." He let out a short laugh that wasn't really laughter. "Mom, you know what I meant?" he said. "I meant I'd choose what's best. You wouldn't want to be kept going if there wasn't a point. I'm just following through. You raised me to be practical. Hearing you raised me used as a shield stung." He twisted my values into cover for closing my choices. I could have raised my voice. I could have fought right there. Instead, I chose silence, not to protect him, but to protect myself. I listened, I watched, I let his phrases land so I could remember them clearly later. What's best? Following through. You raised me to be practical. That night, after he left, Carla returned with a brochure and sat beside my bed. She showed me where my name appeared, where his did, how the forms worked. "You can change this," she said. "As long as you understand what you're doing, your voice is the one that matters. Not his, not mine, yours." Something shifted inside me. For days I'd felt like a person tied to a track, watching the train come. Suddenly I could see the switch on the ground, close enough to reach. My resentment didn't disappear. It changed shape. It stopped being only pain and became fuel. I realized I didn't have to stay in the role of the quiet, grateful mother who accepts every decision made for her own good. I could ask questions. I could say no. I could take back what I'd signed without understanding. Looking at those papers, hearing Carla's steady voice, and remembering Daniel's confident answers, I felt myself step out of the helpless place in my mind. I still loved my son. I always would, but I also loved my right to speak for myself. And for the first time since the fall, I felt a trace of strength returning, like a small light clicking on in a room I thought was locked. By the time the ethics team stepped into my room, my mind was already made up. There were two of them, a woman with glasses and a man with a notebook. They introduced themselves, pulled up chairs, and for once everyone spoke to me instead of about me. The woman asked, "Can you tell us in your own words what you want?" It was a simple question, but it felt strange and powerful. And it also stirred a fresh wave of resentment, because no one had asked it before they started acting on my son's version of my wishes. I took a breath. "I want my code status changed," I said. "I do not want a do not resuscitate order. I want full treatment as long as there's a reasonable chance of recovery. And I want my son removed as my medical decision maker." Saying those words was like flipping a switch. My voice stayed calm, but inside I felt a firm line being drawn. The resentment I carried toward Daniel, toward the way he'd spoken over me, hardened into something clearer, a boundary. The man glanced at my chart. "Your son indicated you didn't want aggressive care?" he said carefully. The phrase "your son indicated" made my jaw tighten. Every time someone treated his opinion like a fact, it felt like a small erasure of me. I kept my voice steady. "He was wrong. He did not discuss those choices with me. I am telling you directly now." I wanted them to hear the difference. They asked me questions to make sure I understood what full code meant. I listened, and then I repeated their explanations back in my own words. Part of me bristled at having to prove I understood my own life, but I cooperated. I wasn't going to give anyone an excuse to say I was confused. When my doctor came in later, he stood at the foot of the bed with a serious expression. "So," he began, "I hear you want to change your code status." Something in his tone made it sound like I was asking for a favor. That bothered me. This was my body, my heart, my lungs, my life. "Yes," I said, "I'm competent. I understand the risks. I want my status changed to full code." He hesitated, then finally nodded. All right, we'll update the chart. Relief washed through me, quiet, deep, and right behind it came an old irritation. Why hadn't anyone confirmed this with me before accepting my son's words? They documented everything while I watched. The nurse read the new order aloud. Code status, full. Hearing it said out loud felt like reclaiming my own name, but I couldn't shake the resentment that I needed an ethics consult just to get back what should never have been taken from me without my input. Next came revoking Daniel's medical power of attorney. Carla, the patient advocate, brought in a form. You can formally revoke it by signing here, she said. We'll scan it into your record and notify your providers. Before I picked up the pen, I remembered his promises at my kitchen table, the way he'd used trust me to move me along. It still hurt to realize those words had been used to get my signature, and then used again as a shield to defend his decisions. My resentment settled into something steady and clear. I signed my name slowly, carefully. With each stroke, I felt less like a passive patient and more like the person in charge of her own life again. I named my new proxy, my neighbor and friend, Linda. Practical, kind, and most importantly, she listened. When I called her, her first words were, "What do you want, and how do I make sure they respect it?" That question alone made me feel seen. When I told Daniel, his reaction reminded me why I had done it. He called that evening, voice tight. "Mom, I heard you changed the paperwork," he said. "Why would you do that without talking to me?" The accusation stung. For years, I'd been the one left out of important conversations. Now that I made decisions without his permission, he sounded offended. Another wave of resentment rose, clean and immediate. He had made choices about my care without asking, yet he was angry that I acted on my own. "I'm allowed to," I said evenly. "It's my body, my life. I need someone who will follow what I actually say." There was a pause. Then he said, "You're making this harder on everyone. We were comfortable knowing things were taken care of. We were comfortable." The words hit me right in the center of my chest. Their comfort had been built on my silence. The system that kept him comfortable had left me one signature away from being denied help I might want. I didn't argue. I let his words hang there. In the past, I would have rushed to calm him, to explain, to soften it, to apologize for upsetting anyone. This time I stayed quiet. His complaint only confirmed what I already knew. Their comfort required me to disappear from my own choices. I was done disappearing. With Carla's help, I filed a formal complaint about how staff accepted his instructions without confirming them with me while I was awake and able to speak. I listed dates, conversations, names. Writing it down reopened some hurt, especially every time someone said, "Your son says," instead of, "What do you want?" But putting it in writing also gave me control. I wasn't a story told by someone else anymore. I was the one telling what happened. As the new documents were scanned into my chart and sent to my other doctors, I felt a quiet satisfaction. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed a little easier. I knew Daniel was upset. I knew family members would probably say I was overreacting, that I had changed. It still hurt, but their reactions didn't decide my actions anymore. For the first time in a long time, my life felt like it belonged to me again, and that calm, steady truth was stronger than any resentment. Edited version, English, voiceover ready, monetization safe, approximately 5,500 characters. When I got home from the hospital, the first thing I noticed was my refrigerator. It used to be crowded with kids' drawings and coupons. Now there was a single sheet in a clear sleeve, my new advanced directive and healthcare proxy, taped right at eye level. Linda had put it there while I was still in the hospital. Seeing it plain as day made me feel steady. And then a small spark of resentment flickered, because before all this, my son held that power in a folder I'd never even seen. The texts started the next morning. Daniel. "Mom, we need to talk about what you did. This is getting out of hand." What you did. That phrase carried the same familiar sting. For years, I'd been the one quietly fixing problems. Now, standing up for myself was being treated like a disruption. Then a group text came from my sister, clearly after she'd heard Daniel's version first. We're all worried. Daniel says you're making choices that could hurt everyone. Could hurt everyone. That line annoyed me to my core. No one mentioned the choices that nearly hurt me. I read the messages, let the resentment move through me, and set the phone down. In the past, I would have written a long explanation. Something gentle, something soothing, something meant to keep the peace. This time, I sent one sentence. I am making sure my wishes are written and followed. Hitting send felt like closing a door, gently but firmly. Their worried, slightly accusing tone still hurt, but it didn't shake me. A few days later, I invited them over for a family meeting. If they were going to talk about me, they were going to do it while I was in the room. They arrived with tight smiles and stiff hugs. Tension sat in the air like a weight. Daniel took the end seat, arms crossed. "So," he said carefully, "you wanted to explain what's going on?" The way he framed it, as if I owed him an explanation for reclaiming my own choices, brought the old resentment right back. I thought of all the times I'd rearranged my life to make his easier. Now, the moment I did something for myself, he expected a briefing. I laid the papers on the table, my new advance directive, the revocation of his medical power of attorney, Linda's acceptance as my new proxy, and the hospital summary. "These," I said calmly, "are my decisions. They're already in my medical record. You are not here to approve them. You are here so I can be clear." The words felt clean in my mouth. Firm. I saw Daniel's jaw tighten. He wasn't used to hearing no from me. He tried anyway. "Mom, you're overreacting," he said. "You're making us look like we wanted something bad to happen." That made my chest burn. He turned it into appearances, how he looked, instead of the simple truth. My life had almost been shaped by decisions I didn't make. My hands trembled, but I kept them folded in my lap. "I'm describing what did happen," I said. "You gave instructions I never agreed to. You asked about long-term care instead of asking me what I wanted. That won't happen again." He opened his mouth, then closed it. My sister added softly, with guilt hiding under her voice, "We just thought it would be easier if Daniel handled everything. Easier, always easier for them, never safer for me." Resentment rose, not loud, not wild, just clear. I had been pushed to the edges in 100 small ways, and I was done stepping back. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I picked up an extra copy of my paperwork and held it up. "If something happens," I said, "you tell the doctors to look in my chart, on my fridge, and in my bag. Do not answer for me. Do not assume. If anyone tries to override this, they are going against my written wishes. And in my mind, I aim that next thought at anyone listening to a story like mine. Don't wait for a crisis. Look up your state's advance directive forms while you're calm. Fill them out when you can think clearly. Put copies where they can be found, on your fridge, in your wallet, with your primary doctor, and in your patient portal if you have one. Don't rely on memory. Put it in writing where it can't be ignored." After that meeting, the pressure increased for a while. A long email arrived from Daniel, full of careful sentences. "We're only trying to help. You're choosing to make this harder. You're pushing your family away." Every line leaned on guilt. Every line suggested my independence was a kind of betrayal. Reading it, resentment flared. Because for years, I had bent myself into shapes that fit everyone else. Now that I stood upright, they called it selfish. This time, I didn't defend myself. I wrote back, "I love you. My decisions about my health care are final. Please respect them." Then I closed my laptop. No debate, no apology. A week later, a handwritten note arrived from a nurse at the hospital. "I'm glad you spoke up," she wrote. "Most people don't know they can change their forms. You reminded me to review my own." That small message from someone outside my family hit me harder than anything else. It rinsed the resentment and left something warmer behind. My voice had mattered to someone. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, the house quiet around me. I looked at the papers on the fridge, at the photos of my grandkids on the wall, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Not because everything was perfect with my son, it wasn't, but because I was no longer handing him the pen to write the ending of my life. And if any part of my story sounds even a little familiar to you, don't wait for someone else to protect your wishes. Say them out loud. Put them on paper. Share them with the people who need to hear them. Then pass this kind of story along to the next person who still believes they're too small to take up space in their own life.